On this note, let us start, or rather continue, with NATO in the new security environment in the 21st century. How should the US and Europe respond to the massive international developments with global repercussions that are challenging the transatlantic relationship? Our opening keynote discussion will explore the most fundamental challenges and debate the best course of action for the US and Europe. Our guests for the panel are, in ABC order, James Carafano, Senior Counselor to the President of the Heritage Foundation, also an E.W. Richardson Fellow there, a leading expert on defense, intelligence, and homeland security issues. Thanks for being here today again. Sitting on the far right again today, this morning. Jörn Fleck, Senior Director of the Europe Center at the Atlantic Council, with primary responsibility for the Center's European Union efforts and the programmings related to Western Europe, to Brexit, and the US-EU trade relations. Thanks for being here with us today. Let's have on stage Tomi Huhtanen, Executive Director of the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies. This is, of course, the official think tank of the European People's Party, the largest European political foundation with activities in more than 30 European countries, also analyzing and contributing to the debate on EU policy. And the moderator is Tamás, Boros, Executive Director and co-founder of the Equilibrium Institute, a political analyst, a co-author of the book Hungary 2030, A Vision for Hungarians. Tamás, also wanted to mention that he's been involved in the development of dozens of great policy proposal packages at the Institute. And now I'd like to ask to the stage for opening remarks to contribute to the discussion afterwards, with him on the panel as well, Tamás Vargha, Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Defense, State Secretary for Parliamentary Relations. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. And I think it's both an honor and a privilege to be able to deliver opening remarks in this panel. Undoubtedly and definitely on the 24th of February 2022, we entered a new era. The Russian aggression against Ukraine was a milestone in European history. And I think it's not an overstatement to say that Western hegemony is being challenged and a new world order is emerging. Today's security complex environment is complex, and I think it's unpredictable. And the trends are unfortunately not promising. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has a fundamental impact on European and transatlantic security. The European security architecture has been forced to adapt. NATO's role and relevance as the cornerstone of European security has had to be strengthened, and I think it has been strengthened. The alliance has expanded and become stronger with the Finnish and Swedish accession. And it is challenging and threatening era. Hungary, NATO, and the European Union must find the right solutions. Hungary's position has remained unchanged since the outbreak of war. We condemn Russian aggression. We stand by Ukraine's sovereignty, and we are helping the Ukrainian people in the largest humanitarian operation in Hungary's history. And of course, we want peace as soon as possible. In line with our policy of providing only non-lethal assistance to our neighbor, we have been working on new forms of support in the last few months. Just exactly a week ago at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting on September the 6th, we were able to announce the Hungarian Defense Forces are ready to organize 2 courses, both on humanitarian demining at the UDCG Demining Coalition meeting. The first course will be on explosive ordnance reconnaissance agent, and the second is a basic site exploitation course with the purpose to learn about obtaining intelligence and preserving evidence on the site of an explosion. The imminence of war has been reminded us that we must be prepared when it comes to the security of our country and our alliance. I think Hungary is a committed and trusted member of NATO. We are fully committed in implementing the new strengthened deterrence and defense posture. And we are very proud that we were able to reach the 2% spending benchmark already last year, well before schedule, and develop our armed forces, taking NATO priorities into due account besides national requirements. Our main contribution to NATO's defense plans includes our most capable land forces, such as recently modernized medium infantry brigade, the bulk of our air force, and several special operation elements. Furthermore, we are the framework nation of the Forward Land Force battle group deployed in Hungary. And I'm personally proud that the NATO HQ MNDC is located in Székesfehérvár, in the city of Székesfehérvár, which is my hometown, which I represent in the parliament. The outbreak of the war has been a catalyst for our development program, and we are determined to build a modern and capable, 21st century high-tech army. We are also proud to contribute to the air defense of Slovakia, Slovenia, and the Baltic countries with the Gripen fighter aircrafts. Besides the new combat equipment, we are also paying great attention to restructuring of the Hungarian Defense Forces, and at the moment we are in the midst of a new recruiting program. I think it's evident for us that in this new era of challenges, we need to be more aware, prepared, and strengthen our alliance, because together we are stronger. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. And let's start the conversation. The title of this workshop is NATO in the New Security Environment of the 21st Century. And we have these 4 remarkable gentlemen here to discuss from American, European, and Hungarian perspective. Let's be very dynamic, so I just start with my first question, and I just urge everyone to download Slido or find the Slido QR code and ask questions as well. So, as Peter mentioned in the beginning, and also it was mentioned many times yesterday, that in its declaration issued after this summer's NATO summit in Washington, NATO announced an irreversible path towards NATO membership for Ukraine. My first question is, how do you assess this wording, irreversible path? Is it too strong? Is it too weak? It's just right? And also, do you think this, when it's written down, it's irreversible? Is it really irreversible? So do you think Ukraine will be NATO member by, let's say, 2030? Mr. Carafano, please.
Yeah, I think it's fine, because I think you have to put it in the context of NATO's interests, and the primary NATO interest is the defense of NATO, right? And I think I'm the radical optimist here. I don't think we talk about this enough, if you actually sit back objectively, NATO is in a better position today to defend the frontier of NATO than it was during the Cold War. And I know I was there. First of all, there's more strategic depth. And when you look at the front line of NATO, you have Sweden, Finland, or Swinland, it's just easier that way, and Norway on one flank, which was never there in the Cold War. You have a Ukraine military that is demonstrated it's capable of defending itself. And the key point is, it doesn't matter to the Russians if Ukraine is in NATO or not. That is a military they just can't bypass. They can't invade NATO and just wave at Ukraine and say, hi, we're going to attack NATO. So that is always a factor and then that is anchored on what we're seeing as a rapidly developing and important Polish military, and then anchored by Romania. I think that's a much more defensible frontier than NATO had before. And if NATO continues to do the things that it needs to strengthen that, particularly expanding air and missile defense so it could defend its infrastructure and architecture from blackmail and attacks, and continuing to develop the deep attack capabilities, which would really hamstring the Russians from doing a conventional attack in the future. Eventually, the war in Ukraine will come to an end. You have a very defensible frontier, and the time will be found right to formally integrate Ukraine into NATO. So I'm the optimist. I actually think we're in a good place. And when you outline what we need for the future defense of NATO, which brings even more confidence to me, the things that the U.S. has to help bring to the table, helping provide and expand air and missile defense, helping NATO develop the Europeans develop long-range deep attack capabilities they need. I'm actually very optimistic that the future is going to unfold just fine.
Thank you. Mr. Fleck?
Well, first of all, thank you, Tamás, Sharika, and congratulations to you and your teams for pulling this dialogue off. And we at the Atlantic Council are delighted to partner with you in bringing this transatlantic security dialogue and a conversation about NATO, Ukraine, European security, and how to confront those that challenge that security and stability in Europe to Budapest. So congratulations and thank you. On your question, look, on the NATO side of things, I would agree with Jim, not to be too boring. I would disagree on the irreversible path and the characterization that that's a glass half full. I think that's not a very meaningful phrase. It doesn't convey the commitment that NATO ought to be making, that Europe and the United States ought to be making to Ukraine. And even, if it's accompanied with usually the words short and well lit, I don't think the outlook is a short path. And that matters not just for European and transatlantic security in the medium to long term. It doesn't just matter to a post-conflict European security order and architecture. It matters to Ukraine in setting its objectives and goals in the current conflict, in messaging to Putin our political will to sustain our support for Ukraine and to really give Ukraine that perspective. And I think that has been at the heart of the problem when it comes to support for Ukraine, that we in the United States and Europe have not been able to really powerfully signal and convey the political will to Putin that is needed in order to impress on him that his aggression will not stand and that he cannot win against Ukraine. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. Now some European perspective.
Thank you, and such a pleasure to be here, Reka, Tamás, NATO, and you all. Yesterday we discussed, and somebody mentioned that in every of this panel, ideally you have a German or at least guy from Brussels. So I guess that makes me the guy from Brussels. You are now sent to Washington, but let's let's put it this way. you know, because Tamás, you mentioned war in Ukraine, I cannot see a way how we can, at whatever constellation, we can make a peace and stop the war definitively. If Ukraine is not member of NATO, or we have a situation that not by name but de facto we have such a, you know, such a assurance that Russia is not able to come to Ukraine anymore, and you know, it may, in my view, it includes also the you know, troops on the ground. So that's what I would say. By the way, I'm not, I'm from EPP's think tank, but I'm not presenting EPP's position, so I'm in the individual, on the individual basis here. So that's my starting point. So we will, in that way, I see it's irreversible. So that's my first point. On the other hand, of course, if you, because what we do in Martens Center, we, you know, look at the discussion, public polling, and all of that. Of course, in that final question, the question is then how do the public and politicians see that? And in Europe we have now, if you look at the public debate, we have a little bit the challenge that actually the support for Ukraine is solid in a political establishment level. But if you go to the individual polling and look what the people think, you know, there's a extremely big difference between those countries who feel that there is a real threat from Russia and those who don't, and that reflects very strongly on you know, how this issue is seen, and it is not on, you know, in those more faraway countries from Russia. It's not that the support for Ukraine is not there. It's more rather than, unfortunately, here in Europe, but since Second World War. We have a situation where you know, the idea of countries and people really going to war, it is very, very far away, and so what we have faced that cultural challenge. But Tamás, as you said, you know, this is panel of discussion. You know, I just if I can go back what Jim said yesterday, we discussed, Jim, and then you made the phrase specific because we speak about, and this during the day we're going to speak about how it's going to play out in the future. U.S. role is crucial. We have two candidates. And you made the statement that Trump is for Ukraine. That support will continue, and I think it's a great statement. And I do believe that. What a little bit concerns me is that, because yesterday we discussed about this Trump making a peace, and there was some comments on that. And I was looking at this morning, C.D. Vance, the vice president candidate, is actually outlined, you know, very clearly what this plan could be. So he has 3 points. First of all, you know, Ukraine can remain independent. Great. Second, the line will be on remarcation. So basically, where the troops are now, that will be the division. But thirdly, the point is that no, the guarantee for Russia of no membership of Ukraine in NATO or other security organizations. I don't know, do we include EU there? And you know, that for me sounds like A, you know, victory for Russia, and B, going totally against what was discussed in Washington summit. So maybe there's some misunderstanding, but if I can come back to Jim to that and a little bit outline what's the thinking.
Thank you. Let the State Secretary to react as well, and then we can start the debate.
Thank you very much. Let me try to approach this problem from in the Hungarian context. I wouldn't put irreversible first. I would put path first. If there is a path towards Ukraine's NATO membership, I think it should be a path that leads to a membership which helps or ensures the Transcarpathian minorities' rights. That, I think that's the first priority of my country. So the path should lead towards a kind of peace, and then first peace, because according to Washington Treaty, a membership must enhance the Euro-Atlantic security. If there is war in Ukraine, I don't think it helps that. And when we reach the end of the path, at the end, there should be a membership which ensures the rights of the Transcarpathians Hungarians.
Thank you. And James, please.
Let me just run through the 3 points real quick. So the first one's relatively obvious, that no administration, either Republican or Democrat, is going to abandon Ukraine, and it's a simple mental exercise. Explain to me a scenario where the interests of the United States are better served if Russia is controlling Ukraine. And the answer is you can't come up with one, which was why any American president who's not an idiot, so I don't exclude Joe Biden, no offense, is going to want a free and independent Ukraine. As we said, we have an opportunity for a very defensible NATO frontier. And a Ukraine military, right in the middle of that, really contributes to that. So it's a clear, sensible objective for any president. The second point, I think, is relatively obvious. The war is going to end where the troops are. This was what happened in Berlin in '45. This is what happened in Korea in 1953. This is what happened in Israel after the '68, '69 war, whatever. That's just a reality because Ukraine is not a part of NATO. NATO is not going to fight to get territory back for Ukraine. That's just factually true. Now, Ukraine is in Russian territory, so they'll have to figure all that out. But the line's going to be where the line's going to be. And the third point is just a statement of the obvious. To join NATO, yes, it is. To join NATO, there has to be a consensus of NATO members to join NATO. So nobody can guarantee something that they don't have the right to guarantee. And they can't negotiate it away, and they can't negotiate for it, right? So you're not going to get NATO to make a statement that says, yes, as soon as there's a peace deal, we will guarantee that Ukraine should join NATO. It's not going to happen. So he's not putting something on the table which isn't actually just a reality, and Putin, not being stupid, knows that. So there's never been a situation where a country has joined NATO where it's been actively participating in a war in its own soil. So there's no precedence for that. So the reality is the fighting has to stop first. This is how we got West Germany into NATO. This is how we had a continuing security relationship with the US and South Korea. This is how we have had a long-term security relationship with Israel. And then the future happens. So reading something into that the United States is negotiating away NATO membership for Ukraine, I just think is not accurate.
Any comment on this or reaction? Or yeah, please.
Of course, it's just semantics. Of course, because if you say that country, we agree in this that country become a neutral. What does it mean? There is no troops. The country stands alone. In Europe, we have we know about neutrality. Look, Austria, look, Finland. That meant that we were alone. There were no foreign troops and no commitment from nobody to come.
But it's not a statement of neutrality. It's a statement of the obvious, which is for Ukraine to join either NATO or EU, it has to be a decision of the EU or NATO. It's not something that can be negotiated away in a ceasefire with the Russians.
But that's what C.T. Vance said.
No, it's not what he said.
Yes,
it's not what he said.
30 minutes video, okay. And you can check it.
Let's move. It's our interesting, but I know what panelists hate the most is answering to a question with yes and no. But I would like to ask you, do you think that by 2030, Ukraine will be member of NATO, yes or no? James.
Yeah, well, it's a democracy, so it's not a yes or no question. I will say, if there is a free and independent Ukraine, and NATO continues on the path that it is doing now to secure the frontier of NATO, I think it's a reasonable objective.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Tomi. Jörn?
No, not under the current political leaderships on both sides of the Atlantic. And that, I think, goes to Jim's point. Ultimately, it is a decision of now all 32 NATO members, whether Ukraine joins or not. Yes, whether we will have a cessation of the conflict will play a major role in this. But I think there's much more in the political leadership side to be done, both in the United States and across Europe, to start that political debate, make it more concrete, and also signal to Ukraine and by extension to Moscow, you know, what that path looks like, and to have those domestic debates. You can't just turn up in 2029 and say, okay, wherever you are, whichever leadership nationally among NATO members or EU members that we're talking about, and then start that debate. And I'm not seeing that in earnest being done at the moment.
Thank you. Mr. Vargha?
Yes, the fightings must end, I agree with you. Fighting must end. There should be peace in the country, and there should be a peaceful and independent Ukraine. And then, again, I agree with you, the NATO members should unanimously agree on membership, but I don't think that will happen before or until 2030.
I understand. Thank you for the honest answers. And let's move to the next question, which relates to my first one, is basically you also spoken a lot about peace and peace process and what will happen in the next few years. Can you draw or can you vision some kind of scenarios? What could happen between Ukraine and Russia? What scenarios do you envision which could lead to peace? So what do you think the most likely scenario, and what are other scenarios you can think about? I don't know. Tomi?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between me and Jim in general analysis is that I think US and we Europeans and US need to do one thing first. Help Ukraine as much as we can, and they need, because we have not done that yet. We have not played that game. So I think that's what we should do. We should, give the resources, permissions, etc. There is concerns about red flags, Russian reaction. We see that many of that, a lot of that is empty talk. We do that, and then there will be a situation. There will be a situation. As Jim said, yeah, most likely. You will be end up in the situation where when the peace comes, that's where the troops are, that's then the situation, but that would be after we have helped Ukraine as much as we can. Secondly, I don't see that peace can be, unless we leave the option that Russia is able to overtake Ukraine, and that means that they need military support. Whether we call it NATO membership or NATO membership except name, no name, that's a different thing. So that basic setting, and then the thirdly that would include then as a consequence EU membership and all that in the long run. It will be a decade-long process for sure.
Thank you. Jörn?
I mean, ultimately, we are talking about cessation of the conflict, but I think we can't look at that in isolation, right, for a number of reasons. Number one, we have the broader geopolitical context where we have really three different regions or theaters of conflict between Europe and the largest land war that Russia instigated since the end of World War II. We have the Middle East, and we have China's increasingly aggressive stances in the Indo-Pacific. And so I don't think we can look at Ukraine in isolation. We need to see that the connectivity between those different theaters. That's number one. For us as in Europe, I think for transatlantic security, European security, the best thing we can do to, what some have termed this axis of upheaval, to counter that is help Ukraine be in the best position by the time of the cessation of armed conflict in Ukraine. And there, Europe and the United States, the transatlantic community, NATO, the European Union, are in a position to co-determine what that looks like. And to Tomi's point, that is where we really need to take off some of the limitations and help Ukraine put itself into the best position it can possibly be. That will determine European security, transatlantic security in the medium to long term. In what position, what conditions can Ukraine set when it comes to a ceasefire, the cessation, any negotiations in the future?
I would not predict any scenario what the hell is going to happen inside Russia. Actually, we got experts in here who are good at that, right? And I think the West strategy has to be, we need a strategy that ensures the security and protection of NATO countries regardless of what Russia does in the future. And here I will express my radical optimism tempered by reality. So my radical is, I do believe that if European allies, in concert with the support of the United States, do the things they need to do to enhance the future conventional defense of NATO, that we are going to get to a correlation of forces that really deter a future Russian conventional threat. And the thing we also don't mention, which is actually a positive development, is there's actually now very broad bipartisan support in the United States for the American strategic deterrent, which wasn't always the case, by the way. There's commitment to modernization. There's commitment to the triad. There's commitment to not just national missile defense, but really thinking more robustly about the extended deterrence in both, not just in the strategic arms, but also in the missile defense and theater defense space. I think on the military front, there's real cause for optimism. The other issue, I think, is my big question mark, and it's the other subject of this conference, which is part of a future stable Europe is not just conventional forces, but it's also growth, a strong and robust economy. And that is as much rooted in future energy policy as the notion of energy security and independence from Russian energy. And I don't like the term energy security. I like the term reliable, affordable, dependable energy, because I think all three of those things go together. They're all essential for future European security, and they're all essential for future European growth, and it's critical that they be delivered not just to Germany, but to every member of all the European countries, because we want them all to be stable and prosperous. I don't have an absolute radical belief that that's going to happen, because I personally don't believe, and other panels can debate this, I think that's impossible under radical green transition. I think that actually works absolutely against that. I think you have to build from a foundation of a strategy that builds on reliable, affordable, dependable energy that makes countries wealthier, more prosperous, more stable, and that allows them to mitigate and address and make choices in the future. So I think, quite honestly, that the broad European strategy for rapid energy transition, I think that needs to change. And I think it's important as Europeans come to grips with that, as they do with the reality of they have to spend 2% on GDP. They have to build up their air and missile defenses. They have to contribute to the frontline defense, and they have to develop the deep strike capabilities to deter the Russians.
Thank you, James. State Secretary, how do you foresee how peace can be achieved in Ukraine?
Fighting ends where the two troops are, and I wouldn't use the word win. We have to reach political settlement, and this settlement should be sustainable, which involves compromises, and that made me sort of forum. This is not an official view; it's my personal idea that what's happening in Kursk might be the beginning of a kind of compromise. So I have some of your land, you have some of my land. Let's swap it back. And I have another idea, which is mine. I haven't consulted military experts. Why are the Ukrainians successful in the Kursk region? Because they're fighting with American and Western-made weapons, which had been produced to fight a fast, quick fight with lots of maneuvers, and they are not that. These weapons are not that good to fight the war in Ukraine, where it's a first World War type war, a standing war with lots of artillery, no movement, no maneuver, and that might lead to a kind of a compromise.
Thank you. There are lots of questions from the audience, which also means that we will skip all the 4 other topics, which I sent to you. So no China, no European strategic autonomy, but lots of Ukraine. One question is, Ukraine is arguably more strategically vital to Russia than it is to the West. Can the gap in political will between Russia and NATO be overcome? First, do you agree with this statement? And the second is, what do you think about kind of political will?
Well, yeah, but it's irrelevant. It can be as strategically vital to them as that. I don't care, because I don't care about Russia and Russia's interests. I care about NATO and NATO's interests. And the reality is, it may not be a vital strategic interest of the United States or even of NATO to defend, to have a free and independent Ukraine, but it's damn freaking valuable. And the reality is we have the capacity, and I actually believe the will, to defend our interests. And if it's in our interests for there to be a free and independent Ukraine, and we have a question of making Russia happy, or making us more safe and secure, I'm betting we're going to bet on us.
Thank you. Tomi?
I think that the argument of the question is questionable in the sense that for us Russia has certain historic narratives and background, and that's the can be the core of the motivation. But for us, as yesterday we discussed, it's the whole rules of the game are in question. So if Russia wins and Ukraine loses, that means that the name of the game is that you have you have army and you use it, and that you fight, and then there is a peace, and that's the new borders until the next round comes, which has implications. We will go here in Europe and globally. We have been. How can we finance education, healthcare, etc., etc.? By not investing military. Of course, it has been US doing that for us, to be all honesty. But if then that model of what would happen in Ukraine becomes the rule of the game in Europe, we would we're not speaking then about the 2%, which I think it's already too little. I think we should speak, even in current conditions, more reaching 3. But we are speaking more 4 and 5, and we'll be looking for wars to come.
Thank you.
I would just add that if you look at the Nordics, the Baltics, Central Europeans, the Poles, and others, there is a clear link and investment in Ukraine's future, Ukraine's sovereignty, and whether Ukraine wins this conflict or not. So I think the premise of the question is a little bit questionable.
If the question is for whom it is more important, for Russia or for NATO, I think I tend to agree with Jim. It's irrelevant. If there is a political settlement, a sustainable political settlement that should be achieved, there should be compromise, and if the compromise is found, then I think it's irrelevant for whom it's more important.
Thank you. Feel free to send more questions, but here we have another one. A bit rephrase it, but the point is that can you imagine any kind of semi-membership for Ukraine? So any other type of agreement between NATO and Ukraine, which has clear obligations and commitments, but not a full membership. There are a lot of theories also, like, I don't know, an Israel type of bringing a lot of weapons and secure or like Taiwan type. So can you imagine any other scenario where NATO provides security but won't provide membership or won't offer membership?
Look, I mean, well, first of all, there's a lot of that already going on. So it's kind of a, you know, the answer is past the question. Look, it's irrelevant. What's going to guarantee the future of Ukraine is Ukraine's capacity to defend Ukraine's territory. And again, a lot of that's already ongoing. And actually, this has actually been a lesson learned, I think. I think this is really important. And we see, you know, we used to say NATO is, where's my Poland guy? Okay, well, I'm going to provide the goulash, and you know the Czech Republic's going to provide shoes, and you know the British are going to provide beer and a couple of planes, right? And this notion we're just going to divide up and what we've seen is we've completely abandoned that idea, and we've increasingly gone to the notion that countries need to have a certain organic capacity for self-defense, because that is a very strong enhancement to the deterrent value, because you never know if the political will, regardless of what on paper, is going to be there on day one when an enemy shows up at your door. I mean, let's not forget, I don't mean to be mean here, but the first American response to the invasion of Ukraine was offering the president of Ukraine a ride out of Ukraine. But the reason why the dynamics of that completely changed overnight was Ukraine actually demonstrated a capacity for self-defense. And that's what allowed the political process to catch up. That's why if you look what's going on in Poland today, in Romania, in Lithuania, in Latvia, in Estonia, it's not just about contributing to collective defense, but it's also about building up a self-defense capability, because that is actually what puts you in the best position to achieve political commitments from your friends and allies. So if the Ukrainians are smart, and I think they really are, what they're honestly really going to focus on, beyond getting in the EU, beyond getting in NATO and everything else, is how do we have a more resilient and defensible Ukraine in the future? And a big part of that, we talk a lot about, is going to be building up a Ukrainian defense industry that organically allows, Israel demonstrated, this as well. Israel is a robust defense industry, and that allows it to carry on even when the political will sometimes weaken. So I think that's really key. And I just want to add one thing here, and this is an area where we really can help, which is, I'm a big fan of the 3 Cs initiatives. We should add Ukraine reconstruction into that. And if there are places where it makes sense, helping Ukraine rebuild not just its infrastructure so it can connect with NATO and logistics, but help build its defense industry so it's more robust.
Thank you. Tomi?
Yeah, but that can easily happen. You can easily, because as Jim mentioned, everybody needs to agree. So you can have a situation that you have all the 29, but then you have one country which leader likes to take photographs with the Russian leader and therefore will be against this membership. So then what you end up with is, for example, that each of these 29 will make bilateral agreements with Ukraine, and it can be even that the one country makes a little bit different kind of agreement. So then you have de facto the coalition of willing, and but no NATO membership by name. But the essence is there.
Yeah, I think I agree. What's happening now is a kind of sort of non-membership membership. NATO is helping Ukraine. Without membership, no NATO member is in war with Russia. NATO is not in war, but we are helping. So it's so I agree. Anything can happen.
Thank you. Final word.
No, there should not be any talk about half membership. They can only be membership or other arrangements, period.
Yeah, I agree with that. Can I have 5
Thank
seconds?
you. Sorry, it was a perfect final word and our time is out. So thank you very much. It was really, really lovely to hear you, all of you, and please stay with us today. Thank you.